I think a lot of people still do those websites like Ancestry.com, and they can be a good thing because you get to learn about your past, where you come from. Some people, they get excited because they have some connection to royalty, and maybe even some of you have a distant relative who was a king or queen. It's important that we know where we're from. It can help us know who we are, but the more important origin story is what we celebrate today, the birth of our Lord. It's because of His birth that we've all been reborn. And through baptism, we become children of God, which means that we're all royalty because we all have a relationship with the greatest King. But what often happens is people put more emphasis on their worldly heritage rather than their heavenly one. They focus more on worldly realities rather than spiritual ones, and they're not the first to do this. In our gospel, John says that Christ is the true light that enlightens everyone, that the world came to be through Him, but the world did not know Him, meaning many people missed Him when He came. They had their own idea of who the Messiah would be, and they weren't open to the Messiah that God sent them. Even today, the Jews, they're still waiting for the Messiah. A couple weeks ago, Father Ernie, he gave a talk on Advent and Christmas. And during the talk, he said that Christmas has lost its significance. He gave the example of the Hallmark Channel. He loves Hallmark. And he said that the Hallmark Channel, they've moved Christmas to July, and they never speak of Christ. It's become a secular holiday revolving around gifts and meals rather than the celebration of the birth of our Lord. And perhaps some of this is because of the way Christ entered the world. Being born in a stable, it wasn't too flashy. It didn't draw a lot of attention, and He was easily missed by those who weren't looking for Him and prepared for Him. But this small, seemingly insignificant event is really the most important event in history. It's the day that Isaiah prophesied about in our first reading, when the newborn King came into the world bringing glad tidings, announcing peace and bringing good news, the news of salvation, and that this little infant wrapped in swaddling clothes is our God and King. St. Francis of Assisi, he thought that Christmas was the greatest feast because it heralded our salvation. But what he saw in his day and age is similar to what we see today. People were forgetting the importance of Christmas. And so he decided in Greccio, a small town in Italy, to construct a live manger scene. He brought in animals, he had hay, statues of the Holy Family, and he just recreated the manger scene there. And they celebrated midnight mass. And by doing this, Francis, he gave these people a way to enter into the mystery of Christ's birth in Bethlehem, even though they're really far away. I mean, Jerusalem and Italy, it's a little distance. But he gave them a way to enter into this mystery. And what's kind of an interesting story, on that night, there was a man who attended Mass, and he was one of Francis's friends. And this man supposedly had a vision. And in it, he saw a babe lying in the crib, in a sleep so deep that he appeared lifeless. Then he saw Francis approach and take the child in his arms, waking him from his sleep. And Francis's biographer later wrote that this symbolized that the child Jesus had been forgotten in the hearts of many, but by the working of His grace, he was brought to life again through his servant Francis. Now, if we return to our first reading for a minute, Isaiah, he spoke about the glad tidings, the peace, and the good news of salvation. Well, these things, they symbolize an ultimate happiness. And by ending the prophecy with, "Your God is King," we're directed to where this ultimate happiness comes from. It's given to those who make Christ the King of their lives, who allow Him to reign in their hearts. Francis, he built a physical manger in Greccio, but each of us can construct a manger in our hearts. Mother Teresa, she once said that, "My prayer for you is that when Christ comes to you on Christmas, He he may find in you a warm home, warm love, like that of a heart full of love, like that of a simple shepherd who was the first one chosen to see Christ. It was a heart full of love for the child of Bethlehem that led Francis to do what he did, which was bring Christ to others. And if our hearts are full of love for God, then like Francis, we can bring Christ to others. And I would say that Christmas helps us do this. It invites us to enter into the mystery of Christ's birth so that we can know and love him more. And one thing that we learn about Jesus from our gospel is that his origin, it goes back much further than his physical birth. He was there in the beginning with God. He's the Word that was spoken to us. And that Word tells us that he loves us. It's a love that's shown in the humility of his life. St. Augustine said that man's maker was made man, that he, ruler of the stars, might nurse at his mother's breast, that the bread might hunger, the fountain thirst, the light sleep, the way be tired on its journey, that the truth might be accused of false witness, the teacher be beaten with whips, the foundation be suspended on wood, that strength might grow weak, that the healer might be wounded, that life might die. And all of this was for us, brothers and sisters. Christ was born and died for us so that we could be reborn and die for him. But perhaps in our own lives, the baby Jesus has been asleep too long. Through our personal sins and lack of conversation with God, he's been forgotten in the manger. But each of us can awaken him by remembering who we are and turning to the Lord. Fulton Sheen once said that there are two births of Christ that are meant to take place. One happened 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem. The other is meant to take place in our souls when we're spiritually reborn. This birth, it's the personal relationship we're called to have with Christ. And I think naturally when we turn to him, we'll begin speaking about him. We'll draw attention to him so that the baby Jesus won't get any rest. He'll be seen and recognized by all as the little child of Bethlehem, our God and King.